You know, I didn't really know what I was getting into when watched The Cursed, but I can safely say, having watched it now, what the hell? Even a man who is pure of heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolf's bane blooms and when the autumn moon is bright. Hey guys, I'm finally back. I'm sorry I've been away for a bit of a while, but for anyone who saw that short video, you know why. Um, and in case, and like I said in that short video, for anyone expecting an Iron review, I'm going to get a review for that film out by next week. In fact, I wanted to do a video on it this week, but I needed a couple days to gather my thoughts on it. And plus, this movie has been placed on the back burner for way too damn long. So, without further ado, let's finally talk about The Cursed. The Cursed, or as it's also known by its other title, 8 for Silver, is a werewolf movie that came out back in 2021, making this the second most recent werewolf movie that I have ever covered on this channel. This movie fascinated me because out of all the werewolf movies coming out in recent years, The Cursed was the only one that people were speaking high praises of. It really seemed like the only werewolf movie that was actually getting people talking. So I saw it for myself finally, and this was an odd one. The Cursed is not a bad film, but it is weird, at least when it comes to the werewolf stuff. Which is what's so odd. When you're talking like the story and the characters, like that's normal. But the werewolf stuff in it is really bizarre. But let's actually start talking about the movie before we get to that. The Cursed takes place in the 1800s, and follows a bunch of rich men called the Elders, who have basically taken this plot of land. However, they run into a problem. It turns out that there's gypsies in the area that also say that this place is their home. And being rich old white men in the 1800s, instead of peacefully talking about it with them and having a discussion, they just decide to up and kill all of them viciously. But as the saying goes, karma's a bitch, and it comes to bite back the town and the rich elders hard. You see, one of the gypsies with her dying breath placed a curse on them, a werewolf curse, involving this set of silver teeth that I assume belonged to a werewolf. Anyway, one of the kids of one of the elders, Edward, is bitten by the teeth and turns into a werewolf and starts attacking people. This is where a pathologist enters the film, a man named John McBride, which, let me just say, I really love this guy's name. John actually served in the military, and he actually had experiences with the werewolves firsthand. Mostly because the werewolves wiped out his battalion and killed his wife and child. Yikes. John is determined to make sure that the same thing doesn't happen to this town. So the whole film is John and the others trying to set up traps and find a way to end the werewolf curse. Now, like I said, this is not a bad movie. In fact, there are a lot of things to really admire about it. For starters, I actually really like the story of this film. This is more than just a regular werewolf story. In In fact, the werewolf side of it isn't even really the main focus of the film. It's more focused on its themes and message. This really is more. This is less of a werewolf story and more a story about revenge and karma and and the consequences for actions. It actually reminded me a lot of John Carpenter's The Thing, which is one of my favorite John Carpenter films. Yeah, and yet despite that, there are likable characters in this film. Sure, all the rich elders are horrible people, but some of them have kids that really don't deserve to be dragged into their parents' bullshit. This is especially the case with Edward's family. Which is his sister, his father, and their mother. These kids had nothing to do with what their father did. They really don't deserve to be put through any of this shit, but because of greed and the lust for power, they're now dragged into it. The acting in the film is absolutely fantastic from everyone. Even the child actors in this film give really good performances. My personal favorite character in the film is John McBride. Not because, again, I really like this guy's name, but he's a very nice and kind person too, but but he's not afraid to call out bullshit when he sees it. He actually is a very likable character. He reminded me a lot of, he reminded me a lot of, say, Van Helsing if he was a lot younger and not played by Hugh Jackman. The look of the film as well is great. It's a very bleak looking film. There's barely any color in it, just nothing but these dark, depressing grays along with this fog that surrounds the town from time to time. It's a very depressing color scheme, but considering the themes of the film, it fits like a glove. The film is just incredibly well shot, too, along with some really cool cinematography moments. One of the best examples of this is the scene of the elders killing the gypsy folk. The entire sequence is done in one shot from far away, creating, and I think it goes on for, if I had to say, maybe 5 or 6 minutes, which means that they probably had to shoot that scene multiple times just to get this one take. That's crazy. It reminded me a lot of that scene in Halloween 2018, where when Michael first shows up in Haddonfield at night, through one great shot, we see Michael walk inside houses and start killing people. This shot reminded me of that a lot. Yeah. Also, the CGI in the film isn't bad. I do have issues with it, and I'll get into that. The practical effects and gore, however, do look really cool. One of the best showcases of the practical effects in this film is a scene where John kills one of the werewolves, brings it before the elders, and performs an autopsy on it, and the whole scene looks like it was done with practical effects. It looks awesome. It was like the werewolf version of those autopsy scenes from John Carpenter's The Thing. But this is where we get into the weird part of the film. Let's finally talk about the werewolves in this film. The werewolves in this movie is the reason why, in my honest opinion, this is the strangest werewolf film I've seen. At least in terms of the werewolf rules. Now, some of the rules in the film are usual werewolf rules. Like anyone who's bitten by a werewolf turns into a werewolf themselves. And while werewolves can be killed by conventional means, they do still have a weakness to silver. which, spoilers for this movie that's now, like, I think, almost 10 years old now, or at the very least. Silver doesn't kill the werewolves, but it ends the curse, hence their fear of it. However, by far, the thing that makes them so weird is an assortment of things. Starting off with their transformation, which reminds me, I've always wanted to talk about this. You see, because werewolves have been around for so long, many different filmmakers and writers have tried to do their own take on the werewolf transformation. I like to break them down like this. You have first there's the old school werewolf style. This is mostly the style you see in much older werewolf films, like the original Wolfman, where through clever editing, showing more and more hair on their body, or showing their facial features changing with each edit. Then around the 80s, you have the most iconic werewolf transformations, where they show the body slowly and painfully changing and morphing into something else. This is the most common depiction of a werewolf transformation, and you'll most likely recognize it from films like An American Werewolf in London, The Howling, or the werewolf transformation scenes in Monster Squad. Then you have the magic kind, which is usually seen in teen romance stories like Twilight or Blood and Chocolate, where instead of showing the full extent of the transformation, they just either immediately transform into a werewolf, or just use some magic sparkle effect, which looks really lame and dumb in my opinion. And finally, you have the most nastiest of the werewolf transformations, the Skin Ripper transformations. It basically does what it says on the tin. Instead of showing the body slowly metamorph, it's more like the werewolf side just starts ripping through the skin and flesh like butter. More violent exploitative werewolf films like the show Hemlock Grove or Wolf Cop do this type of transformation. You could argue there are other types of werewolf transformations that have been done, but these four are the most common seen throughout cinema. So, this begs the question, how does The Cursed do werewolf transformations? Fucking weird, that's how. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to present to you the weirdest werewolf transformation I have ever seen. I'm sorry, what? No, what you just saw, that is real. That is really what happens in the movie. A werewolf transforms by sprouting tree branches out of their back, wrapping them around their body, and then I guess they pop out as a werewolf. What? It is so goddamn bizarre and raises so many fucking questions. Like, why do they sprout tree branches from their back? Why? How does a werewolf bite even do that? I know it's a curse, but like, werewolves aren't usually like magical type creatures. Like, how the fuck does that happen? Why does it like wrap around them like a cocoon? Like, and another thing too is that for some reason most people who are bitten by a werewolf want to be around bodies of water or some kind of liquid. Um, it's so bizarre. It makes the werewolves look like a hybrid between a caterpillar and a chia pet. I mean, I get that you want to do your own unique take on a werewolf transformation. I totally understand that, but this makes no fucking sense. I actually tried looking this up, and the only thing I can factor in is I could find from Googling is that the tree branches sprouting from their back, I guess, is supposed to be like the same kind of tree branches as the thorned crown that was made and put on Jesus's head when he was crucified. Which makes even less sense. Why? That doesn't. What? What is this? I just don't. What? I mean, say whatever you want about. Say whatever you want about, like, Lee Winnell's Wolfman film and all the changes that movie did to lycanthropy. At least the transformation was like a traditional werewolf transformation, showing the bones and muscle rip and tear and rearrange. Sure, the design sucked, but the transformation at least looked, like a normal werewolf transformation. I don't know what the fuck this is, and it's really weird and just doesn't do it for me. Oh, but believe it or not, it gets weirder. In the scene I mentioned where they do a werewolf autopsy on one of the werewolves that John kills, they see the human side still inside of it like a fucking chest burster or something.
It's a movie. Don't touch it. She's gone. Ain't never come back the same. It's the kindest thing we can do for her now, so. My mom said she was a bit sold. Sold. Sold.
Yeah, I'll give that a 8.5 on the what the fuckometer. Now, don't get me wrong, that scene looked great. Like the practical effects and makeup and how disgusting it looks awesome. But why? This was just very weird rules for a werewolf movie. Then, of course, you have the werewolf design itself, which is probably the most normal thing about it. There have been many different werewolf movie designs over the years. Some are like the classic Wolfman design, where it's a human body build, but with fur, claws, and teeth. Others have decided to make a hybrid of the two types of bodies, like the werewolves in the Howling movies or the Underworld films. And then you have the more animalistic looking kind, like an American Werewolf in London. And this movie seems to follow the American Werewolf in London style transformation, where it looks like a wild animal, but looks way too big for a wolf. Like, you could still look at it and see a werewolf, if that makes sense. I have heard some people say that they really don't like how the werewolves don't have fur in this movie, which, it's funny, I heard people give Lee Winnell's Wolfman movie the same criticism. I personally disagree, at least when it comes to The Cursed. By not giving the werewolves fur, they actually have a bit more of an unsettling design, in my opinion. I can't really explain it, just something about an animal that you usually expect to have fur, not having it, just always looks unsettling to me. It's actually, I kind of have the same reaction whenever I see pictures of hairless cats. No offense to any hairless cats owners, but something about them just never looks right to me. Like, it's not supposed to look like this. Why does it look so fucking weird? And that can be unsettling. So I think the no fur design in The Cursed actually does work. But okay, let's actually talk about any negatives that I have with the film, because I do have a couple problems. One problem I have in particular is this film's opening. For some reason, the film opens in 1917, showing, I would have to assume World War One, which to give the film credit, the soldiers' uniforms and designs look very accurate. I actually started playing Amnesia: The Bunker shortly before watching the film, and I could definitely say that the accuracy when it comes to the soldiers' uniforms and even gas masks actually looks very on point. Kudos. But this opening feels incredibly pointless, and if anything, actually is more of a detriment of the film. The only reason why this scene is relevant is because you find out that one of the soldiers fighting is Edward. We know, which honestly hurts the film because, well, he's in 1917, so we know that he lives. Way to ruin a lot of the suspense. I wouldn't mind so much, except that the rest of that scene seems so pointless, and I thought they were going to go back to it in some way. Like, Edward gets shot, and as the doctor's, like, looking through his wounds, he finds a silver bullet lodged in him. I actually thought the movie would cut back to that and be like, oh shit, because he had the silver bullet removed, he's a werewolf again, or some shit like that. They never cut back to it. You could literally cut that opening scene out of the movie and just set it in the 1800s, and you would miss nothing. The opening scene, while it looks good, is completely pointless. Yeah. Also, this movie is a slow burn. It really takes its time, which I usually don't mind a slow burn, but, like, it goes way too damn slow. Like, and while the characters are good, they aren't really, like, enough to hold your attention. Honestly, it reminded me a lot of the movie Sinners, because I've heard people criticize Sinners for taking a while to get going as well. The thing is, though, Sinners at least had the advantage of having a cast of very likable characters. So, like, yes, that film takes a long time to get to the vampire stuff. But it's keeping your attention with a lot of its great characters and its great dialogue and acting and visuals. Like, there's stuff always holding your attention in Sinners. There isn't really any of that in The Cursed. The characters are fine, but nothing noteworthy, really. With the exception of John and and Edward's mom, a lot of the other characters feel very bland. Not awful, but just generic, mainly. Also, some characters in this movie make really fucking stupid decisions. There's literally a scene in this movie where a maid goes outside to do the laundry. Lady, there's a fucking werewolf out there. Fuck the laundry. Get back inside. And guess what happens? The dumbass gets herself bit. What did you think was going to happen? Stupid character, Jesus. Ugh. I get it. Even some of the best horror films have characters that make stupid as shit decisions. But even by those standards, this is too dumb. Like any rational person, even given the time period, would have been like, nah, fuck that noise. My life is more important than the fucking laundry. Like, any rational or sensible person would be in that mindset. But okay, my final thoughts. The Cursed isn't perfect, and and some of its choices with the werewolves is questionable, but despite that, this is a pretty damn good film. I know I kind of spent the second half just kind of ripping into it a bit, but this is a solid film. The acting is great, the characters are likable enough, even if they are a bit bland. The visuals are great. The visuals are great. The werewolf design works. I would have preferred a more practical effect looking werewolf over CGI, but that's just me, and even then the CGI doesn't look that bad. The practical effects definitely look better though. Practical effects will always look better. But yeah, despite my issues, The Cursed is a solid werewolf film, and is definitely light years better compared to the last werewolf movie I covered. I'll pick this shit over Dark Wolf any day. I'm going to give The Cursed a B-. Has problems, but a pretty damn good film, and I'd recommend it to a werewolf fan that's looking for something a bit different. But alright, The Cursed. Have you guys seen it? What did you think about it? Let me know down in the comments below, and if you like what you see here, like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. That's all I got for tonight. Stay tuned for next week, as I'll be doing a video on Iron Lung. See you later.